Hey my loves, you can call me Lashe, and today we'll be cutting and sewing this traditional inspired buba and fringe skirts. So make sure you watch till the very end and check out the timestamps as I'm sure you'll learn one or two things before the end of this video. Now don't forget to leave a like, drop your questions in the comment section and subscribe to my channel. Let's move. I know it's a bit odd to draft out buba on a pattern paper as it's a very straightforward process, but as this is a beginner-friendly tutorial, I'll make use of my pattern paper to explain in detail and to ensure we don't make mistakes on our main fabric. To start with, keep in mind that when it comes to buba, there's no joining at the shoulder. That means you have to cut the main fabric on a fold of 4. Just pay attention and I'm sure you understand what I mean in a moment. To fold your pattern paper or your main fabric for your buba, you need the widest part of your measurements, and in this case, that's our bust circumference divided by 4. If the widest part of your measurement is your shoulders, when divided by 2, go ahead and make use of your shoulder measurement. And this happens in cases of our itty-bitty community members. Let me give a brief explanation on how to take your buba's shoulder measurements. You place your tape rule at the midpoint of your shoulder at the back. You know that point where you feel your spinal cord bone? Yes. Place your tape there and measure from that point down to where you want the sleeve of your buba to stop. Whatever you get will be divided by 2, and that is your buba shoulder measurement. So back to what I was explaining earlier. If you are part of the itty bitty community and your shoulder measurement divided by 2 is 10.5, while your bust circumference divided by 4 is 9 inches, the widest part of your measurement will be your shoulder measurement, and that is what you use to fold your fabric into 4. Now back to cutting. Place your tape at your starting line. I didn't rule out a starting line as I want to make use of the full length of this pattern paper. From your starting line, measure and mark out your bust points and your buba's length. Don't forget to add sewing allowance to the hem of your buba. About 1.5 inches will do. Keep in mind that we'll be adding slits to the sides of our buba at the hemline, but put a pin in that for now. Once you've gotten your lengthwise measurement, make use of your ruler to rule out the lines. On the bust point, measure and mark out your bust circumference divided by 4 and add a sewing allowance of 1 inch. On your buba's hemline, mark out that same measurement of your bust circumference divided by 4 plus 1 inch sewing allowance. And finally, mark out that same measurement on your shoulder line, your bust measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch. Go ahead and connect this point with a straight line. For the neckline, a typical buba's neckline is 4 by 4 inches, and that's the measurement I will be using for this client. You can decide to increase or decrease this measurement based on yours or your client's preference. I'm labeling the lines just so it's clearer for you to understand. Go ahead and cut out your buba's bodice at this point, and don't forget that your shoulder will be on fold while cutting. The next thing you want to mark out on your buba's bodice is your round sleeves measurement divided by 2. For this client, I'm making use of 9.5 inches. Keep this measurement in mind as it will come in handy in just a minute. Notch out this point on your buba so it's easy for you when you want to join your sleeves to the bodice. To cut out your sleeves length, remember the shoulder measurement I explained earlier? You have to subtract your bust circumference measurement from that shoulder measurement. For example, this client's shoulders measurement is 21 inches. So 21 minus 10.5, which is our bust circumference, will give us 10.5 inches. And that will be our sleeves measurement. So let's cut that out. On a folded pattern paper, mark out that 10.5 inches at the upper and lower parts. For the sewing allowance, we'll be needing 3 inches, half inch to join the sleeves to the buba's bodies, and 2.5 inches to turn the hem of the sleeves. We're making use of 2.5 as the hem of the buba sleeves are typically wider and not the normal 0.5 inches hemline. My pattern paper is not up to the needed measurement, but I've made sure to note that down so I don't forget when cutting on my main fabric. Now to the circumference of your sleeves. Place your sleeves in such a way that the folded part aligns with the notched part on your buba's bodies. Mark out that rounded sleeve measurement at the upper part just like I'm doing right here, and add 1 inch sewing allowance from that marked out point. Repeat the same thing at the other side and connect with a straight line. Go ahead and cut out the excess and notch the folded part of your sleeve just so it's easy for you when it's time to join. Obviously, once it's time to join, you flip the folded parts so that it aligns with the shoulder. You can see our buba is currently taking shape. To quickly explain the slits before we cut this on our main fabric, from the hemline of your buba, measure and mark out 5 inches. You can decide to increase or reduce this a bit. Once it's time to sew, you use the 1-inch sewing allowance to connect your buba just like I'm ruling out now, and you use 1-inch sewing allowance to join the sleeves of your buba as well. Now onto the skirt. To fold your pattern paper, we'll be making use of the widest circumference measurement, and typically for skirts, that is the hip measurement. So for this client, our hip is 40 inches, which divided by 4 is 10 inches. So 10 inches plus 2 inches of sewing allowance will give us 12 inches. You can go ahead and use about 12 inches plus to fold your pattern paper into two. Once you have your pattern paper folded into two, rule out your starting line, after which you measure and mark out your lengthwise measurements. This skirt will have a waistband, so we'll be deducting the band's measurement from the skirt. I want the band to be 1.5 inches, and because I'll be factoring in 0.5 inches to join the band to the skirt, I'll place my tape rule on my starting line, leaving 1 inch out. So from that 1 inch on the starting line, measure and mark out your hip point. This client's hip point is 9.5 inches. Measure and mark out the skirt length as well. For this client, I'm making use of 16 inches, and I'll be adding 1 inch for sewing allowance. Keep in mind that we'll be making use of two lengthwise measurements for this skirt, as in the design I showed at the start of this video. One part is higher than the other, so the 16 inches plus 1 inch of sewing allowance is the longest part of the skirt. You can decide to increase or decrease this measurement based on your preference. With your ruler, connect this point with a straight line. So here's our waist, our hip, our hem, and sewing allowance. On the waistline, mark out your waist circumference divided by 4. On the hip line, mark out your hip circumference divided by 4, and on the hemline and sewing allowance line, you can mark out the same 10 inches if you want a straight skirt, or reduce it by 1 inch or 1.5 inches if you want a penciled skirt. On your waistline, mark out your nipple to nipple divided by 2. This client's nipple to nipple measurement is 8 inches, and that divided by 2 is 4 inches. So mark that out on the waistline and come down by about 4 inches when you're sewing the dart. Still on the waistline, measure and mark out about 0.5 inches on both sides of the dart line, and roll out the dart lines with your straight ruler. My sincere apologies guys, I lost some footages, but I'll be sure to walk you back on what I've done so far. After marking out your dart line, you can go ahead to add your sewing allowance on the waistline. Don't forget to replace the dart's measurements. So that will be your waist measurement divided by 4 plus your 1 inch dart replacement and 1.5 inches sewing allowance. For the hip, there's no dart, so we'll just be adding 1.5 inches for sewing allowance and do the same for the hemline. Go ahead and connect all these points with your ruler. Now back to the darts, come down by 0.5 inches on the center front of your waistline. This is just to make sure the skirt sits properly at the front side. Now fold your dart lines onto one another just like I'm doing right now. Pin it down and hold with a masking tape. Make use of your curved ruler to connect the center front point to the sides of your waistline. This will make sure that your dart line connects seamlessly and one is not lower than the other. I mentioned earlier that we'll be making use of two lengthwise measurements for this skirt. The first one is the 16 inches that we've rolled out. And now to the second lengthwise measurement. Place your tape rule on your starting line, not forgetting to leave the 1 inch out for the waistband. Mark and measure out how high you want the shorter part to be. For this client, I'm making use of 15 inches. You can decide to increase or decrease this measurement. To get the curve of the skirt, measure and mark out the nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2 on the hemline. Don't forget we're using 4 inches for this client, so connect that point to the already rolled out dart line. Now on that dart line, measure how high you want the curve to be. For this client, I'm making use of 3.5 inches. Now with your curved ruler, connect these 2 points together. Because this skirt has an asymmetrical design at the front part, we'll need to mark out fully the front pattern so we can accurately get the asymmetrical shape. So to achieve this, take your tracing wheel and trace out the circumference lines and the sewing allowance line, just like I'm doing now. Once done, make sure you use your curved ruler to mark out the circumference measurements that you've just traced out on the other side of your pattern paper. And make use of your straight ruler to connect the hemline and the sewing allowance line to the other side of the skirt. What you want to do now is connect the longest part of your skirt to the curve on your dart lines. You can make use of your curved ruler for this, or you can decide to use your freehand. After this, you want to make sure you add your sewing allowance back to the skirt. So I'll go ahead and mark out 1 inch just like I'm doing right here. Make sure you pay attention to what I'm showing on the screen, as you notice that I didn't just add 1 inch below the longest part of the skirt. I marked out my 1 inch following the 1 inch I already have below the 16 inches. Once you're done marking the sewing allowance, go ahead and connect the lines with your curved ruler. I know I'm currently marking out the 1 inch sewing allowance on the new hemline, but don't mind that, that's an oversight on my part. Now you can go ahead to cut out the front pattern, but don't cut out the asymmetrical part, as we'll be using this front pattern to cut out our back pattern. For the back pattern, we'll be contouring our butt, so it sits beautifully on the roundness of our butt. Stick with me and I'll show you what I mean. Take your front pattern and place it on another pattern paper, and on the hip line, come out by 1 inch. We're adding 1 inch because we'll be deducting ½ inch from both sides of the front and back pattern. And because our pattern paper is on fold, that is 0.5 inches times 4, which will give us 2 inches. So because our back pattern is folded into 2, we'll mark out 1 inch. So that's 1 inch on one side and 1 inch on the other side, giving us that 2 inches that we deducted from the sides of both the front and back pattern. Do you understand? If you don't, kindly rewind this video a bit, just so you can rewatch, follow what I'm saying, and follow the clips I'm showing. And if you still don't understand, just drop your questions in the comment section and I'll be sure to respond to you as soon as possible. Now use your curved ruler to connect the new hip line we have on the sides and connect the center back of the back pattern as well. Make sure you round up any angles, as you don't want any sharp corners. Still on the center back of the back pattern, measure and mark out 1.5 inches for the zip allowance and connect with your curved ruler. Don't forget to join this zip allowance to the waistline and hemline with a straight line. Measure and mark out the same dart line on the back pattern as well. And now you can go ahead to cut out the back pattern, not forgetting to cut on the new line at the sides. To make things easier for you, extend the hip line on the back pattern and notch the hip line on the back pattern, so you don't make any mistake while joining the back and you are aware of your butt contour. Now you can go ahead and cut out the 0.5 inches drop on the front pattern paper. At this point, you can decide to cut the asymmetrical part of your front pattern, but I'm deciding against that, as I'll be pinning my pattern paper to my main fabric and cutting both of them at the same time, just so everything aligns as neatly as possible. For your back pattern, come down by 5 inches for the dart. You can mark it out just so you are aware when cutting on your main fabric. And speaking of main fabric, don't mind me, guys. The Christmas spirit is yet to leave me. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, by the way, my loves. So yes, it's time to cut what we have drafted so far on our main fabric. I'm making use of this gorgeous damask material for this client. Starting with the front pattern, I will cut out the full pattern, including the lower parts that I will do away with later. And like I mentioned, this is just to make sure everything aligns as neatly as possible. Don't forget to notch your darts, okay? Now you can open up your pattern paper and main fabric and pin the pattern paper to your main fabric. Once you have this pinned, you can now go ahead to cut out the asymmetrical part on your front pattern. You can see I didn't cut exactly on the sewing allowance we marked earlier by the side. And that is because I want the front pattern to align as closely as possible to the back pattern by the time I'm done joining. After cutting, you can see that our skirt is already taking shape. Don't forget, you can decide to make the curve as high or as low as you want. Now to the back pattern. With your fabric on fold, pin your pattern paper on it and go ahead to cut it out. Don't forget to notch your dart at the waistline and notch the butt contour line at the center back as well. Now repeat this by cutting out your lining as well, not forgetting to notch all the appropriate lines, your dart lines and the butt contour line at the center back. And for the front pattern, make sure to open both the main fabric and the lining. Align them together so you can cut out the curved parts. Now that we're done cutting the skirt, it's time to cut the buba. Fold your main fabric into 4, making sure that the upper part that will serve as our shoulder is on fold, as we have no joining at the shoulder of buba. Place your pattern paper on your main fabric, pin it down and go ahead to cut your main fabric. To make things easy for you while joining, you can notch your armhole's length, your shoulder and your buba's length. Notching the buba's length will make things easy for you while stitching your hem allowance. After this, make sure to cut out the neck of your buba as well. For the sleeves, fold your main fabric into 4 and place your sleeves pattern paper on the main fabric, making sure to take note that the upper part of the sleeve is on fold. Pin your pattern paper to the main fabric, measure and mark out the extra allowance you need for your sleeve if necessary. Once you're sure everything is properly aligned and marked out, go ahead and cut out your sleeves. Notch the upper part of your sleeve that you'll be connecting to the shoulder. Now that we're done cutting the pieces we need for now, it's time to sew. Starting with the buba, specifically the buba sleeve. Not forgetting that our hem allowance for this buba sleeve is 2.5 inches. Make an initial fold of 0.5 inches and double the fold with 2 inches. Pin this down all across and give it a good press so it's easy for you to sew. A little bit of disclaimer here, my loves. Because I'm being considerate of your time, I'll be doing most of the sewing, if not all, off camera. But I'll be sure to explain exactly what I'm sewing, okay? So once you're done ironing the hem allowance of your sleeves, take them to your sewing machine and sew the hem with a straight stitch. If you're part of Cassandra's community, you should know how important ironing is by now. So it goes without saying, make sure to iron every piece every step of the way. Once you're done with both sleeves, open up your buba and use a bias tape to turn the round neck. For those who don't know how to turn with a bias tape, let me give a brief explanation. With your main fabric facing right side up, open your bias tape up and place one edge as close to your round neck as possible and stitch all the way around. After this, you fold your bias tape in and you just run a top stitch all around, after which you give it a very good press. This is what you should have when you're done. Now to fix our sleeve, turn your buba inside out and use a pin to hold both the front and back parts. Placing your tape at the shoulder, measure and mark out your round sleeve divided by 2. And measure and mark out where you want your slits to start from as well. For this client, I am using 3.5 inches. All you want to do now is to connect these 2 points together with a straight stitch, using the 1 inch sewing allowance that we added while drafting the pattern. Once you're done joining the sides, fold the slits with a double fold of 0.5 inches, just like I'm doing right now. Take this to your sewing machine and run a straight stitch from one end across your seam line to the other end. Give this a very good press once you're done, after which you hem your buba with a double fold of 0.5 inches. Make sure that your buba's length at the front and back are the same and align. To join your sleeves to the buba, run a straight stitch on each sleeves using a 1 inch sewing allowance. Once you're done joining and ironing, insert the sleeve into the buba, making sure that the right sides are facing each other. Pin the notched upper parts together. Take this to your sewing machine and run a straight stitch from the front parts across to the back parts using a 1 inch sewing allowance. Make sure to repeat the same thing on the second side and be sure to overlock the fraying edges of your buba. My apologies, my loves. I forgot to show you the finished product of the buba, but rest assured you'll see how it looks on the mannequin at the end of this video. And finally, it's time to sew the skirt, the long-awaited star of this video, if I do say so myself. Start by sewing your dart. For the front panel on the area you've already notched, use a 0.5 inches sewing allowance to start your darts at the waistline and you sew down by 4 inches. One tip I can give to you is when it comes to darts, when you get to the tip of your dart, instead of back stitching, just sew it all the way through and cut your thread, leaving enough to tie off your dart at the end so you don't have bumps or cases where your darts perk out. So repeat this on the second side as well and on the front panel of your lining. For the back panel, still using a 0.5 inches sewing allowance at the top, sew down by 5 inches and tie off your darts as opposed to back stitching. Repeat this for your lining's back panel as well. Once you're done with this, give all the panels a very good press. For now, we'll be leaving the front panel as we'll be attaching the fringe to the main fabric before we can do anything else. So take your back panels and turn your main fabric with your lining all around with a 0.25 inches sewing allowance. But make sure not to turn the waistline with the lining as we'll be joining the waist to our waistband. Once you're done turning the back panels with your lining, make sure to take note of your butt contour notch and mark that out on the lining so you are aware of the right parts to join together. After this, go ahead and give it a very good press and iron in your zip allowance. The zip allowance I have here is 1 inch. Now mark out where you want your zip to reach. Make sure this point is past your hip line so it is easy to get in and out of your skirts, okay? Don't forget to place your tape 1 inch away from the waistline to factor in the waistband we'll be adding soon. All you need to do now is to join the lower part of your skirts where you want your zip to stop. Now that we're done with the back pattern, let's move to the front pattern. The first thing you want to do is to join the fringe to the front panel of your main fabric. I'm doubling the fringe I'm making use of just so it is fuller. Now pin this down from one end to the other. Take it to your sewing machine and run a straight stitch, joining the fringe to the main fabric. Once you're done with this, place your lining on, sandwiching the fringe in between your main fabric and your lining, and run a straight stitch as close to the fringe as possible. This way, when you flip your lining to the wrong side, you successfully have the fringe dangling underneath your front panel. So guys, let me let you in on a little secret right here. The fringe I have is a glass bead fringe. If you watch my YouTube shorts, I mentioned that I might end up creating my own fringe, as this fringe is a glass bead held together by thread, so I can't cut it to the desired length. The fringe used in the design we're recreating, I believe, is a rhinestone fringe that you can cut with your scissors to your desired length. And normally, that is the kind of fringe you want because it will save you a whole lot of time and stress. But because I could not get my hand on that as soon as possible, and I was on a time crunch, I had to make do with what I have. I've gone ahead to reduce the fringe length off camera, but this is a snippet of me reducing the fringe's length in real time. Let me know if you would want me to make a detailed video of how to achieve something similar to this or how to create your own fringe from scratch. I cannot add that to this video as it would be too lengthy. So once again, back to sewing, my loves. Now I'm done with the fringe and I've ironed out my front panel in a way that the lining pulls a fraction of the main fabric, and that is just so the bias of the fringe is not visible on the right side of the main fabric. The next thing is to turn your front panel with your lining, just as we did the back panel. Once you're done with that, you can go ahead to measure out the circumference measurements, that is the waist, hip and hem, and join the front panel to the back panel with a straight stitch. Once you're done joining the sides, give everything a very good press. And now to the last thing we'll be adding to the skirt, which is the waistband. Measure the round waist of your skirt, making sure to open up the zip allowance as well. And with whatever measurement you get, use that to cut your band. For example, my client's waist is 30 inches, so I will cut a strip that is 30 inches long and 4 inches wide. So by the time I fold my waistband into two and use 0.5 inches to join the waistband to the skirt, I will be left with the 1.5 inches that I want for the waistband. On your waistband, make sure to iron a form of interface on it and make use of stay. To make things even easy for you, iron in 0.5 inches on one side of your band. That will serve as a necessary guideline very soon. Now to join your waistband to the skirt, notch the center line of your band, the parts where you didn't iron in 0.5 inches, and use your pins to hold your band and skirts together all around. When you get to the edge, fold your band into two, making sure the part you ironed with 0.5 inches is folded like I'm currently showing now. Run a straight stitch closing the end of your band and repeat this for the second side. Once you're done holding the sides, take this to your sewing machine and use a straight stitch to join your band to your skirt. After this, fold your band over the joining you just made. Make sure it covers it as seamlessly as possible. You can make use of your pins to hold everything down. Then take it back to your sewing machine and top stitch all around your waistband, making sure your stitch is as close as possible to the already existing seam line, and make sure your stitch is capturing the band underneath. Once you're done, give this a very good press and go ahead to join your zip. I'm making use of an invisible zip to make things as seamless as possible. You can see how seamless the invisible zip is and how the seam lines of our waistband are aligning perfectly. Also take note of how the butt contour is obvious, so by the time your prissy butt is sitting in your skirt, it should almost seem as if the skirt is melting onto your skin. And as promised, I'll be showing the full outfit on the mannequin soon, including the buba. But before that, there's one final step to this outfit, and that is the head tie or gele as Yorubas would call it. I'm using 1 yard of this damask material for the head tie, and all you have to do is use a double fold of 0.5 inches sewing allowance to fold the 4 sides. And now to the final look. Give it up for this gorgeous damask buba, skirt and gele. My loves, what do you think? Did we do justice to this recreation? Yay or nay? Thank you so much for watching up until this point. You guys are the real stars. If you're still here at the end of this video, kindly drop a star emoji in the comment section. I would love to personally thank you. Feel free to drop your questions or design requests you would like me to recreate next, and I'll be more than happy to. Please, my loves, make sure to give this video a thumbs up to support this channel, subscribe and ring the notification bell so you get notified immediately after I post. Until the next video, bye!